Welcome to the Daily Hope. My name is Chuck Butler. Wise theologian and martyr Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, "We must be ready to allow ourselves to be interrupted by God," unquote. Well, we all have our plans, don't we? Things we're looking forward to. Life goes on at its sometimes predictable pace, and then something happens, like an accident or a death or an illness or a pandemic. Something that challenges everything, forces us to reappraise our priorities and often to reset our lives. Shouldn't that be us, though? Feeling initially interrupted and further down the road, hoping to emerge from this global pestilence different inside. Landing somewhere new in our lives or in the world. Perhaps ending up in a place that we never expected ourselves to be. Have you ever felt that your plans were suddenly interrupted by God? Sometimes it happens in a pandemic or in a personal storm, and sometimes it hits us in a season of fruitfulness and blessing. The thing is, we must allow ourselves, as Bonhoeffer stated, to be listening well, to be open to what's next, Lord, to be willing to be interrupted by God. So the year was 1973, and Carol and I were serving in England as the first Maranatha music missionaries from Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, while winning souls in London and in the countryside of Hampshire and launching a new ministry in South Kensington called The Kitchen. I was invited to lead worship at the Spiritual Re-Emphasis Conference in London with Billy Graham at Earl's Court. In the evening, when Billy began to speak, Carol and I were searching the arena for a loo. Carol was pregnant with our first child. Billy ended his talk with something like this: "You may have been called here to Britain from a faraway land, and you've settled in, you're bearing fruit, the ministry is being established, people are coming to Christ, and you have every intention of completing your expected commitment here. But tonight, I'm asking you to be open. I'm going to pray for Christians throughout this event to hear his call to evangelism elsewhere, to other lands, and to other shores." Carol tugged at my sleeve and said, "Are you hearing what he's saying right now?" My immediate concern in my head was, really? We're pregnant. The work is invaluable and blossoming here. Why would God call us somewhere else in this season? Carol stopped walking and said, "Well, let's just pray with Billy right now and just be open." In 2 Kings 7, where we are today, it was tough for Israel. People often respond to such in various ways. Samaria was besieged by the Syrians, and the inhabitants of the city were starving to death. Outside the city, the enemy, the Syrians, had plenty to eat. So here are the characters. First, King Joram, who blames the prophet Elisha for the famine inside the city. Blaming others has been a typical response to all of the trouble that we've faced in this pandemic. Then there's Elisha himself, the prophet, who predicts the famine will end tomorrow. Doubting others is another typical response in a crisis. In such cases, any optimism or godly counsel are often ignored or even canceled. The main doubter in the story is an appointed royal official, a city gatekeeper, who doubted Elisha's prophecy from the beginning. Then there are the 4 lepers. Existing just outside the city wall, they respond to the crisis by reasoning together in their heads. Why should we just sit here till we're dead? If we enter the city, we will starve with the rest of the people. If we enter the enemy's camp, we might live, but again, we might die. So, interrupted by a famine, the lepers step out and enter the Syrian camp, just as God was clearing it completely with the miraculous sounds of 2 invading armies. In the first tent they come to, the lepers ate the abandoned food and hid the valuables they found, and again did the same in the second tent. And then, being deeply convicted, they realized that sharing with others was the right response to an interruption, to a crisis, or to God's miraculous provision. As believers, you and I, the camp for us has been emptied out of our enemies. We are more than conquerors as we emerge from this pandemic. We can continue to blame others, to doubt others, or to sit around reasoning together with ourselves, or we can choose to do the right thing under his leading and conviction, to step out and share God's provision with others. Now, back in London's Earl's Court, Carol and I prayed that prayer along with Billy Graham. Our phone rang the very next morning. It was a call to join a band in Europe the next day, and do 2 extensive tours of all the American military bases in West Germany and present the gospel to thousands and thousands of GIs. Despite our doubts, the well-seated ministry in the UK would blossom in our absence. And like those 4 lepers, we had nothing to lose, but everything to gain by stepping out in faith. Any personal famine, spiritual war in your life, or pestilence may first feel like you've been interrupted by God, but your call to share the good news with others in some other land or on some distant shore should never be ignored. It may be well worth answering that unexpected new assignment. So just be open. God bless you.